If we haven't met yet, if we haven't met yet, my name is Derek Jackson with Wardlaw Heating and Cooling. Today, I'm here with you as the current treasurer of the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce and the chair of Strive's Young Professional Group. On behalf of your chamber, I'm pleased to welcome everyone to today's Fireside Chat with our MPP, Ross Romano. I do want to let everyone know we will be recording today's event for further distribution. To begin with, I want to acknowledge and recognize that we are holding this meeting on the traditional, territorial, and ancestral lands of the Ojibwe people from the Garden River and Batchewana First Nations. To the Anishinaabe people, this sacred and spiritual place has been known since time immemorial as Bawatang. As we continue to learn from our past relationships with our Indigenous communities, we wish to honor the original people on this part of Turtle Island. We thank them for allowing us to work together and look forward to strengthening these bonds and thriving together in the spirit of reconciliation. The Chamber of Commerce believes there is great value in holding open discussions with our elected officials. Today's format allows us to cover issues of public interest and interest specific to the business community in an informal manner. As a chamber, we also feel that it is important that we provide our members with opportunities to remain engaged with our elected representatives. As we have navigated the challenges related to COVID-19 during the last 2 years, we have looked to the Ontario government to guide the province, our healthcare system, our education system, our vaccination programs, and our business community. Locally, our chamber partnered with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and the Ontario government to deliver our small business rapid test program. In just over 6 months, the program allowed the distribution of more than 55,000 rapid tests to more than 250 local businesses, at a time when testing was essential for many of the businesses to remain open and to keep their staff members and families and our community safe. Before we move on to our fireside portion of today's agenda, I want to take a moment just to acknowledge the Chamber Board of Directors who are joining us today. We have John Offadani, Marcus Wilson, Sheila Purvis, Salvatore Marchesi, Ian Grant, Randy Shurin, Sherry Berlinghoff, Jennifer Rushton, and our moderator today, Michael Stone. Also, a big thank you and welcome to our chamber staff, Maggie Murray, Don Ferguson, and of course, Rory Ring. Today's fireside chat will be led by Chamber's immediate past president, Michael Stone, TD Wealth Private Investment Advisor. Michael, it's all yours. Take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
All right. Let's get down to this. So welcome, everybody. Great to see everyone here today. We've got some great numbers and very much looking forward to hearing from Ross today. So I'd like to briefly introduce today's our special guest today, the Honorable Ross Romano. The Honorable Ross Romano serves as Ontario's Minister of Government and Consumer Services, having been appointed to the role in June 2021. First elected as the member of Provincial Parliament for the Sioux in a by-election in June 2017, Minister Romano spent a year as a member of the official opposition, serving as the critic for Northern Ontario Jobs and the Ring of Fire. Minister Romano was re-elected in June 2018, this time as a member of the government, and became the parliamentary assistant to the Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, as well as the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs. Prior to assuming his current role, Minister Romano was first sworn into Ontario's cabinet in June 2019, serving as the Minister of Colleges and Universities. Born and raised on his family's farm in the Sioux, Minister Romano knows firsthand the challenges and opportunities facing Sault Ste. Marie and Northern Ontario. Whether at home or Queen's Park, he is always fighting for well-paying jobs and sustainable jobs in the Sioux. Minister Romano is committed to ensuring the people of Sault Ste. Marie have the necessary tools to meet local job demands, as well as advocating for the needs of his constituents to ensure that Sault Ste. Marie continues to thrive. Minister Romano currently resides with his wife and 3 sons in Sault Ste. Marie, and as you can see, he's in his home. Looks like he's finally got some of the renos done, although doesn't seem to be immune from any of the supply chain issues that the rest of the world is facing. So welcome, Ross. Good to see you. How are you?
I am fabulous, Michael. Thank you very much. And no, certainly not immune to those supply chain issues, but all the same, happy to be on with you. And unfortunate that we couldn't be doing this in person. I think this is our second Fireside Chat by Zoom, but things are starting to look up. So,
yeah, hopefully, maybe a few more weeks, maybe a couple more months. Who knows? I've said that before, though. I feel like I said that a year and a half ago, then I said it a year ago, and I said it 6 months ago. So I'm not saying anything anymore. I'm just going to sit here and wait. How's the family doing?
everyone is doing fabulous. Kids are happy to be, in school, and
The kids or you?
I'm both happy that they are in school. The first few weeks of the new year were a bit of a challenge. I am ultimately happiest that I recently acquired new internet service out on the lake here, and so Zoom is a lot easier now than it had been, especially with the 3 kids in school, and limited, as many people are aware, when you have some of these packages to the amount of gigabytes. I won't reference how many gigabytes or terabytes I was permitted. All I know is that it was generally not enough. So, but everyone is great. Heather's good. The kids are good. We're all good.
Excellent. Well, maybe in the interest of time, we'll just jump in, because I know we've got a lot of great questions that have come from a lot of our members. So we'll get to it. I think first and foremost, obvious, what is on most people's minds these days is trucks and convoys and bridge blockades. So maybe let's jump into that. What impact does this emergency act have on the government provincially?
Well, I will try to focus on the provincial order, and as you are well aware, last week, the Premier, earlier this week, the Premier had declared a state of emergency, and the purpose of the state of emergency that was declared by the province of Ontario was to ensure that we are providing extra tools to our police services so that they can deal with the ongoing occupation that is occurring in Ottawa and in other parts of the province, and to ensure that the police have those tools to be able to do their job. We wanted to ensure that they could prevent the illegal blockades and blockages that are occurring specifically in Ottawa, which were blocking people's ability to attend major public works, in some cases hospital settings, emergency services, and of course the critical supply chain issues that it also was causing problems with, or has been. I think it's very important that we note that as political leaders at all levels of government, whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal levels of government, that we do not and cannot direct the police on how to do their jobs. But we certainly can provide them with the extra tools and enforcement measures that they would require in order to enforce the laws that, as politicians, we do create. So it's important to note that we don't direct the police; we do create the laws, and that is something that, as far as the emergency orders are in place right now, those are there to help the police do their job.
Okay, thanks. And I guess on that subject, what impacts do you foresee at the borders with the federal government invoking the same ruling?
I think we saw some impacts already at the Windsor border, which improved the situation dramatically at that border. I think we're fortunate here in Sault Ste. Marie that things were quite respectful here in our community, and didn't have the level of impact we're seeing in the Ottawa region. But by far and large, we are very supportive of those extra tools that are being provided to police through the Federal Emergency Act that they have imposed. We have urged and continue to urge the federal government, though, to take an extremely targeted approach to these newly invoked powers that they have implemented. Again, to really re-emphasize, whether it's our level of government, the province, or the federal government, these rules are put in place to ensure that the illegal blockades are not continuing, and to ensure that people can access critical public services, critical public works. That is something that is obviously imperative, that we not prevent people's access to hospitals, We don't want to prevent people's access to critical major public works, like I said, whether it be hospitals or whether it be just accessing supply chain related industries through the border.
Okay, great. And just, one further question before we move on to a different topic. With the groundwork laid out now for future protests, how will the province move forward in balancing the rights to protest and implementing the rule of law?
This is certainly one of the challenging elements around what we've seen happen recently with this freedom convoy. Obviously, peaceful protests are a cornerstone of every democracy, certainly of our democracy. But blocking of major public works, as I indicated earlier, that impacts us in a significant way. And that can be devastating to our economy. It has the potential to be devastating to health and safety. And we have to ensure that in the balancing of a constitutionally entrenched, obviously, right in terms of the ability to peacefully protest, we also have to balance that with illegal activities, illegal conduct. And that's why we're providing these measures to police, these additional measures, so that they can do the jobs that they are empowered to do. Our government has, as I've indicated earlier, created our own emergency order. And we have, as a government, signaled our intention to make the provincial emergency order presently in place law once the legislature resumes next week. So we will be introducing legislation that will bring into effect the order into law to ensure that these types of activities in the future are prevented wherever possible by giving the police those additional powers that they've been provided vis-a-vis the emergency order.
All right, great, thanks. So in your new role as Minister for Consumer and Government Affairs, what are you seeing as your major priorities now?
So this is one that is always a challenge for so many people to look at the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services and really get a strong sense of exactly what occurs. A lot of people will look at it and say, well, that's the Service Ontario Ministry, because that's the face of what everybody sees. What a lot of people miss about the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, and one of the reasons why I was so excited for the opportunity to come over to this ministry and work within it, is that it is a centralized government ministry. There are only 3 centralized government ministries. We have the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of the Treasury Board, and the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. And what this really is the engine behind the government, which covers just about everything that the government does. There are 3 critical areas that we've focused on in this most recent mandate, or in this most recent last year, that we have targeted as an area that we want to improve on for the betterment of all Ontarians. And those 3 areas that I will just very, very briefly highlight, you have the real estate portfolio, you have the supply chain and procurement aspect of the file, and then you have the digital first but not digital only element of the services that we provide. The first piece, and we may want to go into a little bit more depth, I'll leave this to you, Michael. But the first piece is so critical. As the Minister of Government and Consumer Services, you are the property manager for the province of Ontario. Some of you may have heard of the general real estate portfolio, which is managed by Infrastructure Ontario, and that is managed by Infrastructure Ontario through my ministry. The whole purpose of what we're trying to do with the real estate portfolio is to make it easier for properties that are currently not being, the use of those properties isn't currently being maximized, to be able to transition those into surplus properties quicker, and then be able to dispose of them quicker and put them into use again. One of the great sort of positives, if I can put it that way, that we've already accomplished through the real estate element of the work that we're doing is we've been able to put 243 properties so far back into productive use. That is generated in putting those back into use. We generated an additional $135 million in revenue. And also one of the great elements of this as well is reducing your overall liabilities. So by disposing of these properties, we've reduced our overall liabilities by $9.6 million annually. And we're continuing to work on this in order to consolidate all of Ontario's real estate into one authority. Presently, the general real estate portfolio that is managed by my ministry represents approximately 25 to 30% of the overall real estate portfolio in the province of Ontario. But it is a segmented, if you will, portfolio, in that there is also a separate process under the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. There are lands that are held there. There are lands held by the Ministry of Transportation, as many people would recognize, lands held by the Ministry of Forestry, Natural Resources, Northern Development, and Mines. So we want to be able to bring these all under one formalized, centralized process, which would obviously expedite the ability to move properties into surplus and then move them through the surplus process to, again, generate more revenue for the province, reduce overall liabilities for the province, and make it easier to make these properties more effectively useful for all of us. I want to just try to break that down, because I'm only on one of three right now, in terms of how that translates in our community. I think it's always important. We often will say, well, what does that mean to me? People will say, Ross, what does it matter to me in Sault Ste. Marie? The significance of optimizing Ontario's real estate can be seen through an organization like OLG, and you've heard me speak to this in the past. As the property manager for the overall real estate portfolio, obviously we know that we have the Roberta Bondar Pavilion housing the OLG, as well as numerous other places here in the Soo. But when you compare the optimization of that space and what it costs per square foot for that particular place, which houses about 500 employees, there are several more, obviously, down in Toronto. And in that space, the cost of the real estate is so much more significant. How do we optimize that real estate? How do we put that into better use? Obviously, we would suggest that one of the best ways that we could do that is to ensure those jobs are here in Sault Ste. Marie, and that frees up a lot of property holdings in the GTA. So a lot of the work we are doing is looking at how do we improve or revitalize Main Street properties in smaller communities throughout Ontario. How do we look at optimizing more of the space that we have in the downtown center core of Toronto, where those property values are so tremendous, and be able to get more opportunities for affordable housing, more opportunities for long-term care in the big city, while promoting jobs and growth of local economies in smaller communities where we could do a lot more with those assets. So I'll stop there. I don't know if there's anything arising on that one, Michael, but that is a tremendous part of the portfolio, certainly the largest element of the work we are doing, not to be overshadowed though by significant work that is being done in the supply chain, which is the second major priority for our government and for me and my ministry right now, which is really unlocking the huge buying power potential that the province of Ontario has. When you look at our 29 ministries within the government of Ontario, the total spend is over $6 billion a year in terms of their overall procurement. When you add to that the broader public service, so that includes all of your agencies, all of your Crown Corps like OLG, like LCBO, and so many others. And then you add to that the hospitals throughout the province of Ontario. We have a total of 141 hospitals. And then you add to that all of our local school boards, which are 72 in number. There is $30 billion, in excess of $30 billion being spent in the province of Ontario. And we have now created, back in February, we created Supply Ontario, which is now going to be responsible moving forward to be to unlock that purchasing power of our province. How does that translate again into our local community? In a small way, I will just focus in on just the pandemic preparation. And this was something that many of you may recall back in March of 2020, when we first entered into the pandemic. I recall the Premier recall being in a cabinet meeting, the Premier speaking about our PPE and critical supplies that we had in preparation for the pandemic. And a lot of people will remember hand sanitizer, masks were so hard to find. Well, our entire pandemic stockpile that we had in a warehouse had been left sitting there for quite some time, neglected, and we were faced with millions of masks that were rotting, and we're not in a position to be able to provide those basic critical supplies and PPE to our province. And the Premier stood at a podium, as you will recall, and said, never again. Never again will the province of Ontario be beholden to any other jurisdiction. At that time, we were buying masks from China, and most of our PPE was coming from Southeast Asia. Now, I can tell you that we don't buy our PPE from China anymore. We are now purchasing locally. I just before Christmas purchased over $150 million worth of critical supplies, PPE, specifically masks, and they were purchased from a 3M plant in Brockville, other manufacturing places locally within the province. We are looking at securing a nitrile glove factory for the province of Ontario, and numerous other elements of the domestic supply chain that we want to ensure we're maximizing. I could go on for quite some length, so I don't want to, but I think it's really important to recognize that the province of Ontario has a tremendous advantage on a world stage to be able to unlock our buying power and to essentially create the Amazon, for, if you will, of Ontario, so that when people within the public service and the broader public service are making purchases, they can go to one centralized location, whether it be to buy a pen or a pencil, a roll of toilet paper, paper towels for the office. And we're starting to land this plane for you, Michael. We're starting and have begun our work with the critical PPE and CSE area. I have spent so much time over the last month and a half, well, I should say 2.5 months, securing HEPA filters, over 76,000 to be exact. And again, just to land this plane for you in terms of how it connects to our community, I thought it was really important as a Northern MPP and Minister of this government to address the distribution of our critical goods in a different way than typically had been done. And for a lot of people in the education sector specifically, they will note that the receipt of the masks and the HEPA filters happened first outside of the GTA and then worked towards the GTA, so that we ensured that we had all of the things we needed first, and ensured that we weren't left out in the cold, so to speak, in a lot of those areas. But that's been one of the most tremendous areas under supply chain. The last piece I would reference that has been a tremendous priority within this ministry has been moving towards more of a digital first, but not a digital only way of delivering services. I think the most notable one that took a long time to get into the works, but was very, very proud that this past October, I was able to announce the Ontario Business Registry. The Ontario Business Registry has changed the face of how we register our businesses and do financial transactions in the province of Ontario. And I mean, obviously, when you change a system from a paper-based system to a digital system, it does create some challenges in the technology rollout. But by and large, that process has worked exceptionally well. And if you think about once upon a time as members of the chamber here, when you would register your business, you would literally have to file like boxes of paperwork. You'd have to retain a lawyer in the GTA because you had to file these materials there. And people would literally lug boxes of paperwork. And the process lasted for several weeks to months to complete. So we've now created a system where you can register your business or file a return in 16 seconds, as opposed to 16 weeks. As opposed to boxes of paperwork, you now have cloud-based technology, as opposed to having high-priced lawyer fees to be able to register your business or file your return. You can now do that free of charge. And what's great about it as well, of course, is you can do it from Monday to Friday. You used to be forced to do it from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. Now you can do it 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, from the comfort of your living room couch. And so that is something that we're very proud of. And in addition to that, so many other services that we've been able to digitize across the province. And we look forward to doing a lot more. I'll stop there because you may have more specific ones about that. But I think I've probably gone on long enough for you now, Michael.
No, all good, all good. Appreciate the detail. Maybe just going back to your element number 2 that you were talking about. How are the Northern Ontario suppliers going to be represented in this new procurement centralization?
Well, in terms of that, we have what is called the Building Ontario Business Strategy that we've been working on to ensure that we get more domestic based suppliers of goods. But ultimately, the nature of our procurement strategy is not only going to be dictated by price, but ultimately by other factors as well. And certainly we're seeing through the course of this pandemic, a major movement towards a Buy Ontario. And so there is really a goal that we could do a lot more local based procurements and drive a lot more local based products. And again, going specifically into the subject matter of masks as a principal example. If you look at where we get our masks from today versus where we bought them 2 years ago, again, we used to purchase them out of China principally. Now we're purchasing them from Brockville. We're purchasing them from Markham. Again, we're purchasing them from Ontario. Nitrile gloves. Nitrile gloves are only produced in Southeast Asia. The types of the rubber or the plastic type of membrane that they're made out of comes from trees that are only grown in Southeast Asia, Malaysia specifically. And so we've looked at creating new innovations and have made investments in that area to try to secure a nitrile glove factory here in the province of Ontario. This is a huge area of business. As a small example, just last year alone, the province of Ontario purchased through my ministry again over 3 billion gloves. 3 billion. So when you put that into perspective, and the average cost at 68 cents per glove, again, a great opportunity for local-based markets to emerge. I think one of the most critical areas that is important for us to note, and I know there's some questions you want to chat with me about later in this session, is around electric vehicles. That's a great example when you can combine our supply chain activities and how we can deal with centralizing what we do as a government. If you look at obviously all of our MTO vehicles, all of our fleet vehicles, total purchasing power just in the MTO alone is about $3.5 billion a year. If we can centralize all of the vehicles that we are purchasing and move towards more electric vehicles, that gives us a much better opportunity to secure a lot of the battery manufacturing that is going on within the world right now as we move more towards electric-based vehicles. And by being able to pursue the battery manufacturers here in the province of Ontario, we really solidify our auto manufacturers here in the province of Ontario. And how does that connect to the north? Well, all the critical minerals that are required to make those batteries are located in Northern Ontario. So as the Premier once said, never again do we need to be beholden to any other jurisdiction. We have all of the critical supplies we need to make these goods. We have the people we need. We have the innovation. We have the research. We have the brain power. We have the manpower. This is something that we can do more of locally and be able to drive more of our local business initiatives in the province of Ontario, while ensuring that we don't have to address a lot of the challenges that we've seen when supply chains have major disruptions like we saw through this pandemic.
Okay, no, great. No, and you touched on a couple things there. So maybe I'll move into that question. And you've kind of touched on it a bit already, but what is the status of the province's critical mineral strategy? And does the province have a plan to take advantage of the value of battery manufacturing and supply chain? Again, I know you've touched on a few things, but maybe if you could just go into a bit more detail.
Certainly. The government did recently, this past March, I believe it was, we announced last March, announced our strategy to create our first ever critical minerals strategy. Governments around all of the world have identified minerals that are crucial to their own economies, and in addition, minerals that play important roles in supply chains globally. We're certainly in a position to be able to meet both global demand and, of course, local demand for critical minerals. We can continue to supply North America at large with responsibly sourced and produced critical minerals for these types of goods. Some specific examples: cathodes. In Ontario, we're uniquely positioned to become a hub for the processing of cathodes for electric car batteries. When we talk about features of batteries and capacity and power, cathode is the material that decides the capacity and the power of a specific battery, which is composed of aluminum substrate, which is, and I'm not going to get into too many of these details, but when you look at
science class here.
Yes, I know. So a lot of what we have, things like lithium produced here. We have the ability to be able to generate lithium mining in Ontario. There is no current production in Ontario or Canada at this time. However, Northern Ontario has 3 very promising lithium projects that could be part of an integrated battery supply chain for both Ontario and, of course, North America's electric vehicle sector. We have the Avalon Advanced Materials Incorporation Separation Rapids Project, which is 55 kilometers north of Kenora and has an initial capital cost already of $77.7 million. There's another business, Frontier Lithium Incorporated, which is 175 kilometers north of Red Lake with initial capital cost of $869 million. And then RockTech Lithium Georgia Lake project, which is 150 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay. And that has initial capital costs of just shy of 70 million. And with the global demand being what it is for lithium, a lot of great opportunities there. I don't want to get too much in details here. I think it's also important to note that cobalt, obviously a huge part of electric battery manufacturing. Again, we have an investment our government made of $5 million into First Cobalt, which is now Electra Battery Materials. This is a facility which first of its kind in North America and has the capability of producing over 25,000 tons of battery-grade cobalt sulfate annually. Again, huge demand for cobalt worldwide. And of course, everybody's heard of the demand the necessity of nickel. Clearly, we know we are one of the largest producers of nickel in the world. I think, if memory serves me correctly, Canada is the 5th largest producer, and Ontario alone supplies 40% of Canada's nickel in the entire country. And obviously nickel, another very important critical mineral towards that. So I think really to summarize the best way I can, the critical mineral strategy that we have here in the province of Ontario allows us to unlock all of the excellent resources we have in the ground. I recall at one time, we were one of the #1 mining jurisdictions in the world, and we dropped significantly quite some time ago, but we've seen a tremendous increase with our government's investments into the mining sector. And certainly we want to be able to maximize on all the resources we have to be able to support our domestic supply chain and be able to really create ourselves once again as a powerhouse economically through this province to the world.
Okay, no, that's great. So, I mean, just following up on that, how do we protect the sovereignty of our mineral ownership, against countries like China who are targeting these type of minerals for ownership?
Well, I think we do things like what we are doing, which is demonstrate that we have their backs locally, right? Supporting our businesses, trying to create the conditions which are going to allow them to thrive. A friend of mine once said, capital flows in the path of least resistance. So being able to remove as many of the regulatory burdens as we possibly can, ensuring that we provide the types of funding opportunities that we do here, especially in Northern Ontario, things like through our NOHFC fund and numerous other types of projects and different types of government initiatives like the Building Ontario Business Initiative we're working on. We want to really demonstrate to our local-based companies that we are taking an Ontario first type of perspective. We know what we have. We know the strength of our marketplace on the world stage, and we are going to work to continue to protect that. And I think one of the biggest areas that we've really focused in on when I was in my previous ministry at colleges and universities and really connected into the work I'm doing here at Government and Consumer Services as well is just in the innovation procurement alone, and really ensuring that we are doing stronger work to enhance innovation in the province of Ontario, not lose out on there's a saying, and again, not to be specific to China, but there was a comment that was coming out quite some time ago about, jurisdictions like China are coming into our province and picking flowers in Ontario so that they can make honey back at home. We want to ensure that when we look at things like innovation, the innovation continuum, as I like to call it, we're doing everything in our power to really ensure that getting a patent in the province of Ontario, doing your research and taking a project from research right through to development is easier. And that's something that I think we've demonstrated some great success in, and we've really been able to foster a greater sort of Building Ontario business model through that. So it's you know, specific to the question, it relates to the minerals in the ground, but it also relates to the importance of putting a value on our intellectual property, so that we're not throwing it away, quite frankly, and ensuring that we're maximizing on our innovation opportunities here at home.
Excellent. No, thanks. I think that's an important point. So switching gears now, I know this next topic is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts in the Soo, having spoken with a lot of business owners, but labor shortages. They are in every sector of the economy right now, and we're hearing from a lot of members that quality and talent is a major issue. What can we do more? How can we do more as a province to address this?
So I could cite so many different numbers around this one, Michael, but I think it's easier just to speak really candidly about this. This is something that previously in my role as the Minister of Colleges and Universities, you may recall I spent a lot of time speaking about things called micro-credentials. Micro-credentials were one of the first steps I thought that we could take towards really addressing the labor shortage. And a lot of people still will say to me, well, what's a micro-credential? It's a very newfound way of dealing with education. For years, we were really focused on you either go to college or you go to university. You go to college, you get a diploma, you go to university, you get a degree, and then you go to work. We're seeing so much more because of the labor shortages, people being pulled out of school before they even finish programs in a lot of cases. So a micro-credential, though, is a shorter course. You could, and for the first time ever, OSAP will now cover people who can't afford to take these programs. And this is an absolute first in the country jurisdiction to do this. And quite frankly, worldwide, we've really developed a strong leadership stance in the area of micro-credentials, which again, shorter based courses. And they work hand in hand, the institution and the employer, to be able to deliver programming that is very, very specific to an employer's needs. As a local based business, what better would you want than to know that your specific fingerprints are all over the curriculum that a student you're going to later employ is going to learn. And these programs can be done in less than 4 months, less than 16 weeks. Traditionally in the province of Ontario and in the country, OSAP is only eligible for programs in excess of 16 weeks, or sorry, 12 weeks, my apologies. In excess of 12 weeks. Now, in less than 12 weeks, you can create training programs for people that have maybe a very general background education, and you can now utilize those to be able to employ people in that sector. OSAP is now funding these programs. There's equipment funding for these programs. They can be delivered through our local post-secondary institutions, and we're doing it here at Sault College and Algoma University already. And I think that this is going to grow like wildfire moving forward. You're seeing it in a lot of industrialized nations around the world. And I think we have an opportunity to be a leader in that area. Also, tremendous investments that have been made in the skilled trade sector towards apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, trying to bring more people into the workforce. Ministry of Finance last year's budget announced that there was a $5,000 tax credit for education programs. To be able to give those funds back to people who are getting educated so that they can get into the workforce easier, or incentivize them into the workforce. There are many, many different things that we're working on. We created in the health sector, increased the number of nurses and nursing positions, education programs. You'll recall as well, while I was at the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, we changed for the first time ever something that the college sector had lobbied the province for over 17 years, the ability to provide nursing degrees. I was very proud to stand over that policy early in the mandate, where colleges can now offer nursing degrees. And now Sault College is in the position to be able to provide degrees in nursing. And you're not seeing a student have to start a program locally in a community and then have to leave to a bigger city, go to a university to be able to get their degree, finalize it, and in often cases they don't come back to smaller communities like ours. PSWs, we saw such a tremendous shortage in the start of the pandemic, and we were able to provide free education to increase the number of PSWs across the province. I think one of the challenges, speaking very candidly about this, that we've seen in our community, it's really interesting to have started off in politics really just 4 or 5 years ago now. And I remember what first brought me in was trying to find a way to create jobs in our community, and really this major concern that there were not enough jobs. And now I'm hearing the opposite challenge, where we have jobs without people, and the labor shortage is so significant. But through the pandemic, we've seen so many challenges with a lot of people sort of leaving the workforce, and the impact that this has had, especially on service industry jobs. And the labor shortage has grown. I think that we're trying to do everything in our power right now to be able to get more people into the workplace. I think a lot of what we've been able to do is enhance the education system to be able to get more people to be trained for work through the colleges, through the universities, created new, simpler ways to do things. Locally here at Algoma University, as an example, we provided $3 million through the NOHFC fund to create a virtual campus at Algoma University, which I think is really important and can't be underscored, that Algoma went from being one of the most challenged institutions, quite frankly, in the entire province when it came to virtual learning, to being one of the most advanced. They are one of the only institutions province-wide right now that can offer a full degree online. And that allows for a lot of people who had a challenge accessing education in their own backyard to be able to do so, especially in other remote parts of the province, which allows for a greater opportunity for people who do not have schools in their backyard to be able to get the training they need to be able to be great productive members of our workforce. There's no one single piece. There is no silver bullet to this, but I think by ensuring that you're creating the opportunity for people to get educated by doing things like the micro credentials and making them OSAP eligible. I can't underscore the importance of that. If anybody ever thought of taking what is considered a micro credential before we launched this program, these were exceptionally expensive programs. Short programs, if anybody's ever taken one, were quite costly, and there was no financial aid available. So if you couldn't afford to take the program, you were basically shut out from it. Now it's OSAP eligible. So we've created those opportunities for people to take programs. In addition, now for those that are paying for it, you have the tax credit up to $5,000, which will usually cover a program of that nature. So there's still more that can be done, but I think that a lot of the work that has been done has been quite beneficial to improving the ability, even just in the area of Indigenous populations, bringing more women into the workforce. We've created a lot of programs, pre-apprenticeship programs and apprenticeship programs that really enhance those areas. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention something very near and dear to my heart, which is through the NOHFC, which is the internship program at the NOHFC. I think I might get into that a little bit further, subject to some of the additional questions you might ask Michael in this area. But that internship program alone in our community has contributed in the last few years just shy of $5 million in internship programs. And many people on this call may have an intern or have had an intern through that program, which is, again, creating an opportunity to enhance our workforce. And in a lot of those cases, an NOHFC intern becomes a full-time employee of your business. So there's still a lot more work to be done, but I think a lot of critical steps have been taken in that area.
Absolutely appreciate that. Maybe getting into maybe more specific, delving into this issue, what can the province do specifically to get more women back into the workforce?
Well, this is something that we're obviously very motivated to continue to work on. Right now, we are so dedicated to supporting and empowering women wherever possible. We're dedicated to ensuring ensuring equitable access to economic as well as social opportunities for women and girls. Especially important to note that we really want to make sure we're providing the supports to women who have disproportionately been impacted by the pandemic because of the nature of the disproportionate impact to the service industry, which was largely in our work sector. Sorry, our females in the workplace were certainly overrepresented in the service industry sector, and that has seen such a hit during the pandemic. So we really want to focus on training programs that are going to support women in the workforce. And we have a number of those types of programs. I recall announcing a few years back, again, through the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, the Homeward Bound program, which was a program specific to Indigenous women in pre-apprenticeship programs, welding programs. We're also making enhanced investments to getting women into the STEM sector, which is an area that has largely been overrepresented by men traditionally. So areas in science, tech, engineering, skilled trades. These are areas where we're seeing a lot more women enter into the workforce, and we're getting away from sort of that traditional that sort of taboo that existed in the past that sort of prevented females from entering into an area like either engineering or the skilled trades. But we're seeing such a dramatic increase in that area. And a lot of these programs are enhancing the ability of women to get into the workforce. And again, I don't think you can underscore the importance of things like the micro-credentials and being able to learn where and when you basically making sure that these positions are available. The training for these positions is available to some individuals and disproportionately women who are taking care of kids at home, have a mortgage to pay, already have a part-time job, and have to learn at home. Through these programs, they can learn where and when they like, when it's most convenient for them, so that they have that opportunity to transition into a second career. And things like the second career program, of course, enhance that as well. So it's about making sure that we create the opportunities where we make those investment in people and their potential and give them the opportunity to be able to join our workforce.
Excellent, thank you. On the other side, so Indigenous participation in the workforce and entrepreneurship is also very critical to our future. How do you promote this in our Indigenous communities and prepare companies to employ Indigenous persons and add Indigenous owned businesses to their procurement processes?
Well, earlier in the mandate, Minister Rickford announced funding of $8.2 million through the Indigenous Economic Development Fund to support businesses, job creation, and skill training. That funding specifically supports 26 projects across Ontario and 6 Aboriginal financial institutions, including the Métis Voyageur Development Fund, which is part of Ontario's commitment to supporting Indigenous economic development and led projects. IAO works very closely with the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade to support Indigenous businesses and workers and encourage uptake in provincial programming to address challenges that have been brought on specifically by COVID-19. We also have the Ontario Small Business Support Grant, which provided some assistance in that area, as well as the Skills Development Fund. One thing that I worked closely in my previous role, again at colleges and universities with the IAO, the Indigenous Affairs Ministry, was something that was brand new and never been done before. We provided OSAP again for Indigenous institutes to provide their education, which when Indigenous Institute Act was first created by the previous government, they were actually not OSAP eligible. And that was quite a surprise actually to me when I first joined the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, that a student at an Indigenous institute was not able to apply for OSAP. So we changed that, and now they are able to apply for OSAP. Again, you have to give an individual the opportunity to get the education they need to be able to secure a good job. Another piece that I was very proud of, which I referenced earlier, was the NOHFC internship program. And perhaps I'll conclude on that one because you may recall last year, along with Minister Rickford, Minister Fideli, and of course, Premier Doug Ford, we announced that the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund internship program had been changed into the People and Talent program, and 2 streams were created. And one of those streams was specifically the Indigenous worker stream, or the Indigenous workforce development stream. And since 2018, this program has provided local not-for-profits and public and private sector businesses in Sault Ste. Marie with 176 internship positions alone. over those years since 2018. And the total amount of funding for internships just in our community alone is just shy of 5 million. It's actually, just to give you the total here, it's $4,986,460. And that has created 176 internship programs within the community. So those are things that I would stress to everyone here. If you really should take advantage of programs like the NOHFC wherever possible, to be able to get staff as well through an internship program.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for touching on a lot of that. Now switching gears here, so dropping automobile licensing fees will drop revenues in the province by about 1.9 billion. How will this affect our already ballooned budget that we've inherited from COVID?
So this is something that is being deliberated still, if I could put it that way. So I can't get into too much detail on this one. It is something that we are looking at. I think our government has a really strong history of trying to stand toe to toe with workers, with the little guy, and try to, as you know, our premier said many times, try to put money back in people's pockets wherever possible. These fees in Northern Ontario are, $60 per vehicle. In the South, it's 120. Most households have a couple vehicles. It's not an insignificant amount of money. And I think having that opportunity for people to have those fees back would certainly help a lot of Ontario families, especially through this challenging time. The amount of money that is offset from the budget is substantial. But, when I look at most recent statements through our Minister of Finance, what we have seen is, notwithstanding that we have been in the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenge that's provided us, even through all the additional investments we've made, we've actually reduced our deficit since we first came into government in 2018 by a couple $2 billion already. And the forecast for the future seems strong. Given the opportunities that exist, I think we have to also look at what this really is, and it's essentially a tax. The whole purpose of having the registration system is an inventory of vehicles, and this is something, again, that is quite specific to my ministry and a lot of the work when I referenced at the outset that sort of third service piece. I've been working very closely with Minister Mulroney on this file and looking at a better way for us to have a registration system. There are opportunities that exist here to not only put more money back in people's pockets, but to have a better system both for policing and to have a better system to track the inventory of vehicles in the province, which is all that the VALTAG system really was designed to do, but it became a money grab. And I think that, the fact that we're used to it is perhaps one of the challenges. It is another way that government's got their hand in your pocket. And we're going to look at that and look at ways to balance, ensuring that we put more money back in people's pockets, but ensure that we have the revenues we need in the province of Ontario to satisfy things like reducing the budget, or reducing the deficit, which is obviously very important to our government. But I think that a lot of the strides we've made are showing a lot of positive indicators towards being able to reduce that deficit substantially.
Okay, much appreciated. Maybe one more quick question here before we move on with the program. The opioid crisis remains front and center in our community and causes business losses through theft, as well as creates challenges on the employment front. What are the next moves for the province to address this issue?
So I'm glad you asked me this question, Michael. This has been something extremely near and dear to my heart since first getting elected into provincial politics. And even before then, we know how much the challenge, how bad the challenge is that we face. I think it's important to first off note that there is no silver bullet. And I think every one of us knows that. I think we've all, in some way, shape, or form, been touched by the mental health and addictions crisis that has existed, the opioid crisis that does exist. I think it's fair to say that numbers in Northern Ontario are certainly more significant than they are in the rest of the province. Certainly within our community, we know what the challenges are. I think what's really critical and something that I'm proud of the work that's been done, and there's still a lot more to do, but the nature of the information, so to speak, the education that we've had around mental health and addictions, we've learned so much more in such a short period of time. If you go back to, I recall when I first got elected as a member of the opposition in 2017, the simple language has changed dramatically. Everybody heard about level 3 treatment facility. Treatment isn't a term we use anymore. Now we say withdrawal management. But to think that at that time, a focus, and the only focus, was we need a treatment center so that when a person has an overdose, they have a place to go. Or when police are dealing with someone who is dealing with an opioid related issue, they have a place to bring them other than the emergency room in the hospital. We've now changed the conversation where we're not talking about only dealing with a problem when a person is in the middle of an overdose and has to go to a hospital. We're now focusing on wraparound supports as well as inpatient services, or outpatient services, forgive me. So when we think of that traditional treatment center that we were talking about so much from 2017 up until just a few short, maybe months ago, but I will say years ago, that was an inpatient service, meaning in hospital. So you had to go to the hospital or through the hospital to get that service. We now have what are outpatient services in addition to inpatient services. So I think as a starting point, and I'm going to save my answer if you don't mind, Michael, unless of course you want me to expand more provincially based. But really what the province's strategy is, that I should have stressed at the outset, is to go more on local based needs. We can't paint the same brush across all of Ontario because the challenges in Sault Ste. Marie are not the same as the challenges in Brampton. The challenges in Timmins are not the same as the challenges in Toronto, and they're not the same in Sudbury as they are in Scarborough, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to ensure that our focus is community-based, and working very closely with Minister Tabolo and Minister and Deputy Premier Christine Elliott. We've really, I think, done a pretty good job at trying to strike that balance to create something that is very locally focused. So specific to those inpatient services and the treatment sector, go back to, again, 2017, we had 12 beds that existed at what would have been considered a level 1 facility at the detox center on Queen Street next to the hospital. We now have 20 beds, 16 being provided in hospital and 4 acute care beds in hospital. And we're expanding that to obviously the recently announced withdrawal management services center that is being renovated up at the old Sault Ste building, which is going to house 20 beds plus an additional 4 beds that are going to stay in hospital, acute beds. So those are for people who have additional emergency type of medical needs beyond the needs related to the opioid crisis or opioid specifically. Those inpatient services are here. And I think it's very important that we as community members and leaders and business owners, we really must stress to our community that those services do exist. Those traditional inpatient services do exist, but we also have to be very pragmatic in our approach. We should not only focus on dealing with the problem when it gets to the hospital, because for some people that's too late. And some people don't make it that far. That's the real challenge that we have. And for too many people, they don't know what services exist. So I think what's important for my role, and something that I have really worked to try to promote and express out there, is that we now have outpatient services. You have the RAM clinic at 123 East Street, which provides withdrawal management services that traditionally exist in a hospital, provides them from Monday to Friday, 9 to 4 p.m. But what about if you're a person who's having a struggle and it's not Monday to Friday, 9 to 4 p.m. We now have mobile services that are being provided through funding, again, through the province, and you know about the community wellness bus, where the bus is traveling with a nurse practitioner on the bus into areas of the community, some of the locations where we know a lot of our homeless populations exist, where we know a lot of our significant issues exist with the opioid crisis specifically, to be able to provide those services and supports to people where they need them most. But we don't stop there. We also have in-home services. So if you're at home or you have a residence, you can call the hospital and a nurse will come to you. And those are, again, that was funded by a program through the province of Ontario. So we now have in-community services through the RAM clinic. That's a difference from that just came into place in 2018. Earlier this year, or last year, sorry, the community wellness bus. So again, bringing those services, withdrawal management services to people. And then in addition to that, the in-home services, mobile services, where the services of withdrawal management will come to you. That's very, very important. But again, we didn't stop there. Prevention education is very important in order to ensure that we can prevent a problem before it happens. So we now have what we call community-based wraparound supports. We've provided funding to Algoma Family Services, $1.2 million towards the anti-human trafficking strategy, which is to ensure, like, we have to appreciate that obviously this does happen in our community as a border community. We do have human trafficking happening in our community, and providing mental health and services to people prevents is a measure of preventative care to try to help people and their families address a lot of challenges. We also have an additional amount of yearly funding for counseling services that was provided to Algoma Family Services to specifically try to help families at risk. We have through a program that I announced with Christine Elliott, Minister Elliott, and Minister Tobolo here in Sault Ste. Marie. We were at the Indigenous Friendship Center where we announced funding of $1.2 million in funding that went towards mental health counselors, addiction workers, specifically at the Indigenous Friendship Center, as well as in Batchewana First Nation, to provide some targeted supports, preventative care supports in that area. We also were able to increase mental health funding for our secondary schools, both at the primary and secondary level. There was additional $480,000 that went into providing mental health supports at those levels, again, to try to provide young people with those supports that they will need to hopefully avoid challenges that may arise later in their lives. And we also did that at the post-secondary level, where we've seen a tremendous increase. I announced earlier this year, a significant increase in funding at that level as well, where our local college and university received around $150,000 in additional funding to provide those supports at that level. I don't think I can speak to this in such a short fashion, because it is such a big, tremendous area that requires so much attention. But I think the most important thing that we can tell people who are struggling in our community, and certainly in the province and the country at large, is that there are services there for you, and those services are going to continue. We call it the roadmap to wellness. It is focused on trying to ensure we're providing more local-based community supports to people where and when they need them most, and ensure that we focus not just on treatment, but those wraparound supports that include prevention and education. And wherever possible, we want to make sure that we're solving the problem before they end up in an emergency room. We want to make sure we're providing people the support they need before they're suffering from an overdose. I think that this is something that, again, ending where I began on this one, there is no silver bullet, and there is so much more that needs to be done. But I think that we've made some really critical steps towards providing the services to people, again, where and when they need them most, and really focusing on not focusing on a one-dimensional approach, but a multifaceted approach to try to provide that level of care to people that they need.
No, thanks a lot, Ross. I know, yeah, we could probably talk about that all day, because it is a huge issue, and it, you know, it affects everyone, not necessarily from a business standpoint, but a personal aspect as well, and
Absolutely.
Lots to do, and we appreciate the efforts, but look forward to seeing more come that vein. We're going to take a quick break. So thank you for the very insightful discussion. We're not quite finished yet. We're going to take a few minutes and then we'll do some Q&A afterwards. But next, I want to take a few minutes to briefly speak about a program that we at the Chamber are very proud of. We have partnered for several years with the Discoverability Network. Virtually everyone on this phone call or virtual meeting is an employer and is in business to serve customers. 6.2 million Canadians live with a disability. That is a number that no business should be ignoring. As business leaders, we should be proactively taking steps to ensure that our businesses are accessible for everyone. That includes both customers and employees. The Discoverability Network offers a wealth of opportunities to connect with new employees and to guide your business to greater accessibility. We have that responsibility to our staff, to our customers, and to support the AODA, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. I'd like to introduce next Donald Sala of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce to briefly introduce the Discoverability Network. Donald, it's all yours, please.
Thank you, Michael. That was an excellent introduction. I feel like you've done part of my job for me. I appreciate that. I do have a short slide deck to share with everyone, so I'm going to share my screen. And can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. And I'm going to, so now it should be full screen. So as Michael said, my name is Donald Sala. I'm a program manager with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and their Discoverability Network program. I'm going to discuss briefly the benefits of being an inclusive employer, as well as introduce the Discoverability Network. To sort of summarize why the Ontario Chamber of Commerce got into this business, however, you're already obviously familiar with the Ontario Chamber being representing over 150 local chambers with 60,000 members across the province. However, what you might not be aware of is that prior to the pandemic, actually in 2019, 75% of Ontario businesses reported that finding talent was their #1 barrier to growth. And specifically, those skills and talent shortages were limiting business growth and development and innovation. And of course, the pandemic has only exacerbated these trends. So the Ontario Chamber, being concerned with the health of business and workforce development, identified that a very feasible solution would be to support Ontario businesses to access a relatively untapped but viable talent pool. And that is represented by people with disabilities who can help fuel growth and innovation and provide a measured return on investment. Before I get into the Discoverability Network, however, I do want to talk a bit about inclusive hiring, and to begin with, some of the barriers that have existed to hiring for this population up to this point. People with disabilities tend to be employed at a lower rate, 59% lower actually, or 59% as opposed to an employment rate of 80% of people without disabilities. And the gap has persisted unchanged for quite some time, certainly over a decade, looking at the figures that are available right now. Some typical reasons for this are attitudes, just misconceptions about competency or productivity, as well as liability and things like that when hiring someone with a disability. Incorrect assumptions about costs that are associated with hiring someone. There's a misperception that accommodations may cost a lot of money, or that people with disabilities are automatically going to require accommodations, which is not at all the case. And we'll talk a bit about accommodations in a few slides. And of course, capacity. Lots of businesses don't necessarily have dedicated HR functions, especially small to mid-sized enterprises. You have people wearing multiple hats. I know that's common over many sectors right now. And so it can be difficult to find the capacity to help with hiring, training, retention, onboarding, and that sort of thing. I do want to speak about some of the facts related to disability and employment, though. You may be aware of some of these, you may not. I certainly hope there's something here that provides information you haven't come across before. But when we survey small businesses, 77% of them say that people with disabilities they've hired exceed or at least meet their expectations. More specifically, job retention is much higher with people with disabilities. They rate higher than your average retention rate of employees without disabilities. The productivity, 90% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on performance. And when it comes to capacity, the Discoverability Network is here to assist with training and finding talent, as well as supporting your recruitment efforts of job seekers with disabilities. So When we talk about these facts and some of the benefits that I have listed here, the 87% of people, consumers we're talking about here, indicate they would prefer to give their business to companies who hire inclusively. 72% higher staff retention means huge savings in terms of the cost of employee turnover. I think all businesses are aware that there are significant costs related with high employee turnover. So the more you can minimize those, the more you can invest in other elements of your business. Attendance ratings, we know absenteeism is a big problem as well, but 86% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on attendance. And health and safety, which is something that has come up, and certainly has been brought up. Again, another misconception that somehow there are going to be safety concerns with hiring someone with this disability. The statistics don't bear out that misunderstanding. The reality is that 98% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on health and safety. So there aren't increased liabilities associated with hiring from this population. If we take disability out of the equation and just talk about the savings because of the higher retention rate, the better attendance and lack of absenteeism, the health and safety, the productivity, why wouldn't you want to hire somebody who has all of those things associated with them? So it's good for business, and we're here to support it. When we talk about attracting diverse talent, we have some suggestions. I'll go through them briefly. Building accommodations into your process is one easy way, rather than just the standard AODA requirements. If it's built into your process where you are simply asking people if they might require an accommodation, it gives them a readily available and ready-made opportunity to share that information. It starts the conversation naturally. And as you'll see as we move on to I believe it's the next slide, most accommodations actually are not related to disability. So building accommodations into your process is going to be valuable for everybody. Creating accessible job postings is another big one. And by that, I don't necessarily mean, we're all aware of the need for accessible documents, things like that, and accessible language, but that's not actually what I'm referring to here. I'm referring to job postings that specify what you actually need for the job, what a business requires, as opposed to the job postings that we're all used to seeing, which tend to be very long lists of things that may or may not be required for the job. So a good example is many job postings state that a driver's license is required. And using myself as an example, I don't have a driver's license. Every job I've ever applied to has said that a driver's license is required, but the reality is it's not a driver's license that was required. It was the ability to commute and move between locations and go to different locations throughout the city in order to do the job that I'm required to do. And I'm quite capable of doing that without a driver's license. I have to explain, obviously, how I'm going to remain productive, even if it takes me a bit longer to get from one place to the other. But the job postings, really what they should have said is that the requirement is the ability to get from one location to the other and remain productive throughout the day. I don't need a car to do that. I just need to be able to remain productive and demonstrate how I'm going to do it. So creating accessible postings, looking at what is actually required for the job and really just listing what is needed so that people can speak to their ability to do that job. And of course, using diverse recruitment tools. I don't think I need to go into great detail about this, but when we talk about recruiting job seekers or talent with a disability specifically, you're looking at targeted platforms or opportunities. So the Discoverability Network is one, and I'll explain how we do that in a few slides. The Spectrum Works Job Fair, which happens in April, may be another. So just considering the tools that are being used. I said I'd speak about accommodations. When we talk about accommodations, we're not talking about extras. We're not talking about additional things that have to be provided for someone so they can do a job. They are simply changes to attitudes or processes or the workplace so that somebody can perform the job maybe differently. Standards aren't lowered. You're not hiring people who can't do the job and then making it possible for them to do a job that is really not appropriate for them. Again, using myself as an example, I really love astronomy. You can't see it, but there are a couple telescopes behind me there. I'm rubbish at math. There are no accommodations that will enable me to perform an astronomer's job. So I'm not going to be applying for those jobs and I wouldn't be hired for them. The point here is that you're hiring people who are able to do the job that you require, but they may need to do it differently. And you're already doing this with respect to accommodations. Businesses have a great amount of experience and knowledge when it comes to accommodations. It's just that they tend to be related to things like pregnancy, childcare, modified duties associated with WSIB, religious, personal, and other reasons. Disability is just something that hasn't been commonly part of the conversation, and so it tends to be perceived as somehow apart from these other areas. But of course, the majority of workplace accommodations are provided for personal, family, and religious reasons. And when we talk about numbers and data, because, well, evidence-based information is usually the best way to explain something or demonstrate something. 19% of businesses are reporting no costs for accommodations, and 60% actually cost nothing. 93% are a one-time cost of less than $500. And these investments provide a measurable rate of return. So 25% of companies report saving $20,000 to $100,000 because of effective accommodations, and a return of $28.69 for every dollar invested. And when you think about the retention rate and the costs of employee turnover and absenteeism, if there is an accommodation that needs to be made for someone to do the job differently, or maybe some change to the workplace, it could be flexible hours, it could be a different method of performing work, any number of things. I won't go into a great amount of detail, but if these investments are made and then you have an employee who's going to stay with the business for longer, they're going to grow with the business, there's going to be greater loyalty, there's going to be less absenteeism, then you're going to see a generation of these kinds of returns on the investment. So the Discoverability Network, now that I finally get to sort of the core of the presentation and what that is. It is a program created by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce specifically to facilitate connections between qualified talent with a disability and businesses in order to address workforce needs. So everything we offer, all the services we offer to businesses are free. They're at no cost to you. We operate an online job matching platform. This will match job seekers with disabilities to jobs that you post, and it will match them based on fit for the job. So you'll create a posting, you'll specify what kind of work experience, education, or skills are required for the job, and then the system will match job seekers to that posting based on overlap between what has been specified in the post and what is in their profile. So they might have the skills a job posting is looking for, they'll be matched based on that, and when they apply, you'll be able to see why they were matched to that job. We also provide free training and workshops on a host of disability and employment related topics, such as inclusive recruiting, accommodations and disclosure, hiring and retaining talent with a disability, and a variety of others. We have many workshops. I won't go into all of them here, but we can certainly offer the training and the free professional development for you and your teams. And we operate networking events that connect employers to job seekers, and not just to build disability competence, but to learn from each other, to share best practices and success stories. We also connect resource providers with various stakeholder groups that provide resources and tools to support businesses in their recruitment efforts of job seekers with disabilities. So when you see invitations for those events, we would certainly welcome your participation. We have one coming up actually on March 8th, which is the last of our series in our 2021 fiscal year events. And then we'll be doing something new in the new year because, well, we should change it up, and also just for my sanity, I can only do the same event so many times, and this will be the 6th one. But we would certainly welcome your participation. And we'd welcome you to connect with us. When we talk about the benefits of using the Discoverability Network, we mentioned the free job matching portal and training. We also have a roadmap and tools that you can access when you're on the site that can help you develop your own processes for hiring and retaining talent with disability. We offer a viable single point of access to connect with this labor market. We have a number of employment service providers who we partner with directly, who are supporting their own talent pools and provide supports to businesses, so we can facilitate connections there as well. I mentioned the networking events. And in the end, we're here to provide ongoing support for these recruitment efforts. So whether it's someone to help you navigate the posting process on the Discoverability Network, maybe you just don't have the time to put the posting up yourself, we can put the posting up for you, we can post roles on your behalf, and we're just here to provide any training in an ongoing manner that you might need, or training support, including training or any other resources that you might require. So we're always available for you to contact if you need something. I mentioned a roadmap. If you would like a roadmap to hiring job seekers with disabilities, you're welcome to follow this link. The 5 steps we've listed are really finding talent, how to find talent, interviewing and hiring, and some of the best practices related to that, what onboarding and accommodations might look like and how those conversations could occur, and promoting your success, because we did mention that 87% of consumers would prefer to give their business to accessible, inclusive employers. So promoting your success is just good business practice. It's it's a great way to attract patrons and increase customer loyalty. So we think that should be part of the process. And that is the end of my presentation. Trying to be concise for you, not my greatest skill, but certainly we would invite you to connect with us now that you know we exist, if you didn't before, and then we can certainly have a more in-depth conversation related to some of your specific needs and answering any questions that you might have. You see my email on the screen there and a link to the site. I'll drop my email in the chat once I stop sharing my screen here. I would invite questions if anybody has them, but I'd also invite you to please connect with us, and we're happy to set up some individual meetings. And I appreciate the time on today's agenda. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Rory, who has been very organized since I came in here, letting me know the order of events. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Thanks, Donald. That was a great presentation. I know, again, hate to rush, but there's so much important stuff that you talked about. So what I'll say to everybody is, I think Donald just shared his email. If this is something that makes sense for your businesses, and from what I hear and the stats, it sounds like it really does. Feel free to reach out to Donald or through the chamber, and we can put you in touch. And try and take advantage of this program, because I think the statistics are quite impressive as to what can be done on the hiring front just to get quality employees. The disability part is irrelevant. What we're looking for is quality employees. That's what everyone's looking for. And so if there are ways to cast a bigger net to make sure that everyone's getting access to the true pool of employees out there, then I think this is a great program. So thank you very much. In respect of everyone's time, I know the plan was to wrap this up for 1 o'clock. So I think we did a great job with Minister Romano covering a lot of the topics. So maybe I'll hand it over to Ross real quick. Is there anything else left you want to add quickly before I hand it back to Derek?
I think, yes. Thank you, Michael. First of all, thanks, Donald, for that presentation. And I think you're bang on something very important. Obviously, we answered a few questions earlier about Indigenous workforce as well as women in the workforce. And I think that's another critical area that you just highlighted, is making sure that we're creating environments that are accessible for all. And certainly with the nature of the strategies out there to try to get more people into the workforce and to be able to accommodate our workplaces as much as possible, that's important. I also want to say thank you to you, Michael, Rory, and all members of the Chamber for putting this on, and for all the work you're doing supporting local businesses in Sault Ste. Marie as well. Derek and the Strive Group, thank you. I want to say to you all as members of our business community, this has been a very trying time, obviously, as a result of this pandemic. I think we can see the light ahead, which is exciting. I'm most excited right now, if I can hopefully end on a sense of optimism, that as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about the labor shortage, when I first entered into politics, I remember Heather and I talking about our 3 little boys and saying, what are we going to do to try to avoid our kids leaving this community? And that's what ultimately led to me running for politics. And I really think that where we are today versus where we were is night and day in a lot of ways. And I think that there are so many opportunities for our youth. There's so many opportunities for our community to grow. I think that there are tremendous opportunities for a community like ours, and for smaller communities across all of this province, and especially in areas like this in Northern Ontario and rural Ontario as well, that traditionally weren't that Toronto-centric sort of environment that we hear about all the time. But as we've come through this pandemic, and one of the critical areas, as I mentioned earlier, on both supply chain, as well as more notably the real estate files that I'm working on, we're seeing such an incredible opportunity where people are leaving the big city to come to smaller communities because of the tremendous advantages that we all promoted for decades. But up until the pandemic, a lot of people didn't really appreciate, I think they appreciated it locally for sure, but I think people outside of our communities and in the big city didn't really appreciate what that meant until they saw the opportunity to work from home. And they saw how much things changed through the pandemic. And we've seen how industries have changed as a result of the pandemic. When we look at things like a critical mineral strategy, we have everything we need in the ground in our backyard. When we look at the opportunities that exist in our community, they're tremendous within our region, within our community, within our province, to really be something that I think is sort of full circle from where we were, decades ago. I feel like we're in a really good place, ultimately, is what I'm getting at. And I'm sort of, it's hard when you're in this setting, if I may say so, to be able to try to speak to you all and give you the chicken scratch version, if I will, of everything that's going on out there. But I think when you look at what's happening, the proof is sort of in the pudding. When you look at the real estate markets and you look at what's happening in our real estate market in particular, and you're seeing it's almost a challenge how many people from outside of this community are now buying real estate in our community. But that is a real indication of the strength of where we are going. And it's a challenge addressing a labor shortage. It's a challenge to find people. There's the ongoing challenges with mental health and addictions. We obviously have our challenges, but I think our challenges are not insurmountable by any means. And I think that we are moving in a really good direction for the future of this community and for the future of something that I know was important to so many people I spoke to when I first entered into this game, if you will. And certainly something that was the most important thing to me, which was finding a way to keep our kids in our community, finding a way to keep our youth home to stay, as I like to speak of a youth committee I started some time ago. But I really do think that those opportunities exist for our kids to be able to remain here, and the opportunities exist for us to be able to recruit more people into this community. And I think that this is one of the proudest moments I've ever had as a member of this city. And I think that we're really demonstrating to the province and to the world the strength of a community like ours, and the benefit of being in a community like this, and the benefits of living, working, and playing in a community like this. So I'm blessed with that opportunity to be here with you all today, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat. I hope I didn't bore you all too much and cause anybody to have a lunch hour nap. Or if I did, I guess maybe I should say you're welcome, or I apologize. So I will turn it back to you, Michael. Thank you again for the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much, Minister Romano. We truly appreciate your time. And in the interest of time, I'll throw things back, excuse me, to Derek, who will wrap things up for us today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michael. As we wrap up today's agenda, I just would like to once again thank everyone for joining and for your continued support of Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce. Your engagement benefits local businesses and the community as a whole. And we thank you for allowing us and to be here and always joining the conversation. If you're not a member, please consider joining. We are the most trusted organization to represent your business and connect you with our elected leaders, government officials, and business leaders. Thank you again to Donald and the OCC for helping to educate us on the Discoverability Network. As many of us battle the shortage of workers, this is a great time for us to broaden our search and assess how we change our approach to hiring and employment. And finally, Minister Ross Romano, thank you again for taking part in today's discussion. With the changes and challenges of the businesses continue to face, discussions like this provide our membership with the opportunity to gain insight into the decision-making process and the considerations taken when making these decisions. I do want to let everyone know very quickly, our next Fireside Chat will be with Mayor Christian Provenzano on March 24th. Registration is open on our chamber website. We will be rescheduling our Resource Champions Empowering the Future session, looking at creating Indigenous prosperity. That was originally scheduled this past Monday. Anyone originally registered will automatically receive a notification of the new date along with a link to join. And we will reopen registration for everyone as soon as these details are finalized. Finally, registration is currently open for our signature International Women's Day event, the Difference Makers Women in Business 2022. Joining us on the event of March 8th for a discussion featuring a local business and professional women from a variety of industries who will share experiences, success stories, and advice to help inspire and support women in business in Sault Ste. Marie. We also present our annual Athena Leadership Award. Thank you there to our presenting sponsors, OLG, our community sponsors, Bell and TD Bank Group, our partner sponsors, Cavanna Fine Photography, and our Athena Award sponsor, Sioux College. This concludes today's Fireside event of 2022 with Ross Romano. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.